Hey Dave, how do you feed and maintain your hive?
Let's talk about that. Hello, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. This is the Buzz channel, and today what we're going to be talking about is some really core key lessons that you need to know as a beekeeper, and it's feeding and maintaining your hives. So feeding is super important. I can't stress it enough, especially for you new beekeepers. When you get a package of bees, you're going to want to feed the bees to make sure that they make it through the summer, through the winter, and you have what's called a survivor colony, so they'll be stronger going into the next season. So there's kind of two things you want to think about when you're feeding. So one is sugar syrup, and sugar syrup is just, it sounds like what it is. It's water and sugar. So come on over here and we'll take a look at a can of sugar syrup. So down there is just sugar and water. I'm feeding it to the bees. Now you're probably thinking to yourselves, wow, this is July 2016. Isn't this a little late to be feeding? No. You want to have a 1-to-1 ratio of sugar syrup. So what that means is for every pound of sugar that you put into a pot, you put a pound of water, you boil the water, you throw the sugar in, and you watch it dissolve, and then you put it in mason jar feeders. I recommend this method. It's the best method because it minimizes drowning of the bees, drowning because the sugar syrup can coat the bees and they'll run out of air. So this is the safest method. You find an inner cover that has a hole, you put the jar inside, and the bees only have access to the jar. They can't get in this box here that protects the jar. So sugar syrup, how often should you feed? You should make sure that you feed when you get your new package of bees until both of these deep boxes have totally, all 10 frames in each deep box have drawn out comb. What I mean by drawn out comb is every frame has comb on it. After that point, the bees should be able to maintain themselves. Once again, it's mid-July. Why am I feeding? Because this top box is still being drawn out with comb. Same thing with that hive over there. So that's sugar syrup, really important. You're going to want to feed a 1-to-1 ratio, remember, for every pound of sugar, a pound of water. In the spring and summer. In the fall, you want to do 2-to-1, which simulates honey. So the 1-to-1 simulates nectar, the 2-to-1 simulates honey. So it's for every 1 pound of water, it's 2 pounds of sugar, so it's thicker. And so that's feeding for sugar syrup. The other feeding that you want to be concerned with is what's called a pollen patty. We can't open up the hive now because we're just not equipped to do that right this minute. But pollen patty is literally, it looks like a flattened pancake, a very flattened pancake because it's very thin. And what you do is it's granulated sugar mixed with sugar syrup, mixed with brewer's yeast, and then you mix in soy flour as a protein source. So the sugar syrup is supposed to simulate nectar, which gives them carbs, and then the pollen patty is supposed to simulate pollen. The pollen substitute patty is supposed to simulate pollen, which has protein. So that's where that soy powder, that soy flour comes from, or what it's for. So how should you make this? There's a great recipe. We'll put it in the description underneath the video. And then how often? Basically, it's the same deal as with the sugar syrup. You want to feed the bees until both deeps are filled up with pollen substitute patties and they look like they're strong. Once again, I'm just using rough guesstimation here, guys. So if you see that your bees are okay and you see that 99% of the frames are filled up in both deeps, go ahead. Obviously, it depends upon conditions. If there's a lot of nectar coming in, then maybe you don't need to feed. I recommend feeding until both deeps are filled up, just to guarantee, drawn out, just to guarantee that the bees make it to the summer. So that's feeding, pollen substitute patties and sugar syrup. The other thing you want to think about is maintaining. So bring the camera over here again. So what we want to do is as we go into the season, there's a couple items that we want to make sure that we attend to. One is when we go inside and we do an inspection, which we'll talk about that later in a later video. We want to make sure that things don't get too sticky in the hive. Why? Because the stickier things are, the harder it is for the beekeeper to move frames around, which is 80% of what an inspection is. And so there's two sticky sources in a hive. There's Propolis, which is the sticky resin. It literally, like this seam here, guys, is literally sealed with Propolis. So if I tried to take just my hands and let this, it would literally be like super glued. So when you go in there with your hive tool on the inspection, you want to scrape off any extra Propolis. That might be tough, but obviously if you keep your tool sharp and keep your tool maintained, it should work. The other sticky thing is what's called burr comb. Burr comb, like all comb, is a little bit sticky, but burr comb it's comb that the bees are not putting in the right place. So every frame, and we'll go into that, every frame has a certain look, right? And so every frame, like this piece of paper, okay, there's comb that's supposed to stay within this rectangle. And when the comb goes outside of the rectangle, when the bees, because it's nature and they just do their thing, when the bees build outside of the frame, it's called burr comb. It's unwanted comb. So you need to scrape this off and scrape this down regularly every time you do an inspection, because if you don't do that, then the frames are going to get stuck together, and when you pull them apart, the burr comb that's out of place will rip the frames apart. It'll rip the comb apart on each frame. So keep the comb where it should be. That's what getting rid of burr comb means. So to recap, burr comb's got to go. Got to get scraped off. Any comb that doesn't belong where it should be, meaning on the frame, and scraping off propolis off the top bars of the frames, and just really anywhere you see excessive propolis buildup, scraping it off. So that's feeding and maintaining. This is July 2016. We're about halfway through the season, and I hope you guys are enjoying beekeeping as much as we are. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment below. And remember, we're going to end this with a sweet quart of honey. Somewhere along the line, we're going to end it with a sweet quart of honey. Signing out.